The wolf at Rowan's gate weighed 800 pounds. His amber eyes watched her like a general sizing up a battlefield. Everything about him said, "I am dangerous." Rowan looked at him. "You're bleeding on my fence," she said. The wolf went still. His ears flicked forward, then back. He had been threatened before. He had been shot before. He had never been told he was bleeding on someone's fence. He was massive silver-black fur matted dark with blood, one flank pressed against the fence post like it was the only thing holding him upright. His teeth, when he let her see them, were the length of her forearm. She didn't flinch. She went inside, came back with a bowl of warm broth and a clean cloth, sat down in the mud 6 feet from his teeth, and set the bowl between them. "I'm going to take the metal out of you," she said. "It's going to hurt. You can make noise if you need to." He didn't make a sound. Not once, in the 3 hours it took her to work by lantern light. 2 silver bullet fragments came out. The third was deep. She packed the wound carefully, the way her mother had taught her. When she finally looked up, he was watching her. His tail swept the mud once. "You can stay," she said, "until you're better." She went inside to wash her hands. He was still there in the morning. She named him Cinder. It seemed right. That was his color in the early light. The harsh black softened to something between ash and night, but it was shot through with threads of warmth that surprised her every time. He was not a dog. She established this immediately and revised her expectations accordingly. He sat on her woodshed roof, not beside it. On it, balanced at the peak with the casual authority of a creature that had never once been told it wasn't allowed somewhere. The goats regarded him with deep suspicion. Her old rooster, improbably, did not. He followed her everywhere. When she walked the fence line, he walked the fence line. When she sat on the porch steps in the evening to watch the light leave the valley, he arranged himself beside her with the settled certainty of something that had decided this was where it belonged and was prepared to wait out any objections. She didn't object. She had a particular gift that she'd never named to anyone outside her family, the ability to see color that wasn't there. Not the color of things, but the color of people. Emotional weather, her mother had called it. Every living creature carried it, shifting and layering, telling her things that words didn't. Cinder's colors had been almost entirely black the first night, a dense, suffocating black. The color of something that had been through a thing it might not survive. But underneath it, even then, a thin thread of something she couldn't name. Not hope. Hope was pale and bright. This was older, quieter. The color of something that had not yet given up, though it had considered it. By the second week, the black had receded. What remained was a complex silver gray, and those threads of warmth were more frequent now, catching the light when she wasn't expecting them. She found him in her kitchen on a Thursday, sweet potato on his muzzle, guilt so evident in every line of his enormous body that she stopped in the doorway and just looked at him for a moment. The cooling tray, the single missing potato, the careful, unsuccessful attempt to cover the evidence with the kitchen rug. She crossed to him, crouched down, and wiped the sweet potato off his muzzle with her thumb. He went completely still, the stillness of something processing an unexpected kindness, as though gentle touch required time to translate. His tail swept the floorboards once. "Next time," she said, "steal the turnips. I have too many." His tail swept the floor again. She went to start dinner. The trouble announced itself with heavy boots. Rowan heard him coming through the Saturday market before she saw him, the particular footsteps of a man who had learned that size was a form of argument, and had been making that argument for so long he no longer noticed it. The crowd parted. It always parted for Garrett Holt. He was the regional assessor for the Eastern Reach, which was a formal title for a man who had decided that other people's land was underutilized. He'd been circling her property for 2 years. He'd circled harder since her mother died and left her the farm, and the particular loneliness of inheriting something you loved but hadn't expected to carry alone. "Healer girl," he said, stopping at her stall. She was not a healer. She was a farmer. Correcting him had never once accomplished anything. "Holt," she said, "heard you've taken in a stray." He smiled with his mouth. "Something large, the kind of large that makes people nervous." "I have goats," she said, "and a rooster with opinions." "That's not what I heard." He leaned on her table. The egg crates rattled. "I've been thinking your land sits on good water. Be a shame if an official review determined it was being mismanaged." He walked away. She packed up the stall and went home early. Cinder was on the porch when she arrived, sitting upright, watching the road that led down from the valley. He'd been watching the road more lately. She'd noticed it and hadn't asked. She sat beside him on the steps. "A man named Holt is going to be a problem," she said. Cinder looked at her. "I've handled him before." His amber eyes were very still. "Don't do anything," she said, because she had a sudden, specific feeling that she needed to say it out loud. "Whatever you're thinking, don't!" He looked back at the road. She wasn't entirely certain he'd heard her. Holt came to the farm on a Wednesday, the way bad things usually did, midweek, when you'd let your guard down. He brought 5 men. They came through her gate in the late afternoon, didn't knock, walked the property with the proprietary ease of people who had already made a decision. Rowan came out of the barn to meet them. "Nice land," Holt said, looking around. "The Eastern Reach Development Office has authorized me to begin formal relocation proceedings for properties deemed agriculturally underperforming." "This property is not underperforming," she said. "That's a matter of official measurement." "Then measure it." His smile thinned. "I'm prepared to be generous about the timeline. You take what you can carry. No. And vacate by. No," she said again, her voice perfectly even. "My answer is no, Holt. It was no 2 years ago. It's no now." He stepped forward and shoved her shoulder. Not hard enough to knock her down. Just hard enough to make the point. She stumbled 1 step back. The barn exploded. Not dramatically. The doors simply ceased to be attached because something had walked through them, and the doors had been in the way. Cinder stood in the gap where the doors had been. The late light caught his fur and turned it the color of a storm preparing itself. His amber eyes were fixed on Holt, and there was nothing in them that Rowan recognized from their quiet evenings by the fire. His colors were red. Not frustrated red, not frightened red. This was deep and arterial and ancient, the color of a predator that had made a decision and was no longer entertaining alternatives. Holt went white. "Call it off," he said. His voice cracked. "Call it off right now." "Cinder," Rowan said. He didn't move. "Cinder." She walked to him, slowly, and put her hand on the side of his neck. She felt the tension in him. Coiled. Massive. The thing that wanted to finish what it had started. "I'm all right," she said quietly. "I'm all right." The red in his colors didn't disappear. But it shifted, darkened, pulled back toward something controlled. He sat down. Holt and his men left at a pace that was technically not running. Rowan stood in the yard with her hand still on Cinder's neck, feeling his pulse under her palm, fast, hard, and gradually slowing. "I told you not to do anything," she said. He leaned his head against her side. "I'm not angry." She looked at the barn doors lying in the yard. "You're going to help me rehang those." The town was afraid of her after that. She'd expected it. Fear was a predictable response to things people didn't understand, and an animal the size of a draft horse that disassembled outbuildings was firmly in the category of things people didn't understand. She came home from a market where she'd sold nothing, no one would approach her stall, and sat on the porch steps and watched the valley, and felt the particular weight of being alone in a way that had been chosen for you rather than by you. Cinder came and sat beside her. His colors were warm gold, the shade she'd been trying to name for weeks. But running through the gold now was a deep, cold blue. The blue of something that understood isolation from the inside. The blue of something that knew what it meant to be the thing people stepped away from. "You know what it's like," she said. Not a question. He was very still. Being the thing people are afraid of. His amber eyes found her face. "It's all right," she said. "I'm used to it." He made a sound, low and brief. The sound he made when he disagreed with her, but couldn't say so. I am, she said. He put his head in her lap. She sat with her hand in his fur until the valley went dark, because sometimes the most honest thing you could do was simply stay. She woke at 2 a.m. to rain and an empty house. She knew before she opened her eyes. The particular warmth that had become part of the texture of her nights was gone. The quality of the silence was wrong. The front door was open. Rain blowing across the threshold. She could see him at the tree line, a black shape moving away from the light toward the dark. She went after him without shoes, without a coat, across the wet grass in her sleep clothes, the cold immediate and total. Cinder! He stopped. Turn around! He didn't. She walked until she was close enough to see his posture clearly, head down, the whole shape of him carrying the weight of a decision he'd made and didn't want to have made. His colors were black again, the suffocating black of the first night, but underneath it, threaded through like cracks in dark stone, was that cold blue. You think you're protecting me, she said. Rain ran down her face. She didn't wipe it away. You think if you leave, the danger leaves with you, that I'll be safer without you here. He was very still. You're wrong. Holt was coming for my land before you arrived. The town was afraid of me before you arrived. You didn't make my life harder. She stopped, swallowed. You made it different. He turned around. He was enormous in the rain. Fur plastered flat, amber eyes catching what little light came through the cloud cover. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her that first night, like something that had forgotten it was allowed to be cared for, and was only now remembering. You're my dog, she said, and her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. You ridiculous, sweet potato stealing, barn door breaking menace, and I'm not letting you leave in the rain. He crossed the distance in 3 steps and knocked her flat into the wet grass. She lay on her back with 800 pounds of wolf arranged carefully over her. She could feel the deliberate distribution of his weight, the intentional gentleness of it, his head beside hers, his breath warm against her cheek. The rain came down and she stared up at the dark sky and felt, improbably, completely warm. His colors had changed. The black was receding, the gold was back, brighter than she'd ever seen it, the blue was fading. And underneath everything, in the deepest part of him, she could see a color she had never seen in any living creature before. She didn't have a name for it. It was the color of something that had found what it was looking for, and was terrified of what it would mean to lose it. All right, she said to the rain in the dark. All right. His throat made a sound, low and broken, nothing like a warning, something much older and much more honest than that. A sound that had been held in for a very long time. She put her arm around his neck. They stayed there until the rain slowed. She found out on a Thursday, not because he told her. He was a wolf, and wolves didn't explain themselves. She found out because of the riders. 4 of them, wearing the gray and black insignia of the Iron Conclave, the faction that had seized the capital 7 months ago and declared the sitting Alpha King a fugitive. She knew about the Iron Conclave the way Border Valley people knew about distant disasters, broadly, at arm's length, the way you knew about a flood that was happening somewhere else. She was splitting wood when she saw them at the crossroads below the farm, comparing something to the landscape. She had good eyes. The something was a wanted notice. A drawing of a man, dark hair, particular set to the jaw and shoulders. She put down the axe and went inside. Cinder was on the hearth rug, watching her come through the door. She sat across from him. I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to be honest. He was very still. Are you a man? The quality of his stillness changed. The stillness of something that had been waiting for this question and didn't know what came next. I'm not asking you to shift. I'm just asking you to tell me if I'm right. A long moment. Then, slowly, he dipped his head. She sat with that. Are those riders looking for you? Another slow nod. Are they going to come back with more? He held her gaze, then looked toward the window, toward the road. Not yes, not no. The look of someone who didn't know, and knew that not knowing was its own kind of answer. She stood up. Then we have things to do, she said, and went to start breakfast. He shifted for the first time in her presence 4 days later. She hadn't asked him to. She came back from the far pasture to find a man sitting on her porch steps, wearing her late father's old work clothes, the ones she kept in the chest in the back room, which fit him poorly in the manner of someone whose body was accustomed to more space than ordinary fabric provided. He was looking at the valley and hadn't heard her coming. She stopped at the gate. She registered this with the same matter-of-fact attention she gave everything, exactly what the charcoal drawing had suggested. Dark hair that fell to his shoulders, jaw like a decision, the kind of face that had been formed by years of being responsible for things larger than himself. Scars on his forearms, silver white and old. A frame that made her father's shirt look like something designed for a much smaller category of man. His colors were extraordinary. Gold, warm and present. A deep, bruised purple. Old grief, the structural kind, carried so long it had become load-bearing. And running through everything, a particular bright thread she associated with people who had been given power they hadn't wanted, and had spent years trying to be worthy of it anyway. She opened the gate. He turned. They looked at each other. "I found the clothes," he said. Low voice, slightly rough, like something that hadn't been used regularly in a while. "I hope that's all right. They were my father's. He's been gone 5 years. He won't mind." Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. The shadow of one. "I'm Callum," he said. "I know. I saw the notice." She said it simply, without drama. Alpha King Callum. Deposed. Declared enemy of the realm by the Iron Conclave. Reward for capture, condition of delivery negotiable. She paused. "You've been sleeping on my heart rug for 3 weeks." "Yes." "And stealing my sweet potatoes." "Yes." A pause. "I'm sorry about the sweet potatoes. I told you to steal the turnips." Something shifted in his face. The shadow of a smile becoming something real, brief and startled. The expression of a man who had forgotten he was capable of it. And then it faded, and he looked at her with something careful and very direct. "You're not frightened," he said. "No." "Why not?" "I've been watching your colors for 3 weeks," she said. "Yours don't look like a traitor's." He was very still. "My colors. I see emotional weather. Everyone has it." She said it the way she said most things, flat, factual, not requesting a reaction. "Yours have been changing since the first night. The black is almost entirely gone now." He looked at her for a long moment. "Tell me what happened," she said. "All of it." He looked at the valley. Then he told her. It took most of the afternoon. The Iron Conclave had been building for years, a coalition of old power lords who believed that reform was weakness, that the border territories should be taxed and controlled rather than represented, that an Alpha King who wanted to change how things had always been done was an Alpha King who needed to be replaced. Callum had known they were organizing. He'd underestimated how deeply they'd gotten into his own circle. The coup had come in a single night. Inner circle compromised. Guards turned. He'd shifted and run because it was the only option left. And he'd been running for 5 months before 3 silver bullets in the Greywood had ended his running. He told it without self-pity, in the flat voice of someone recounting events that had happened to someone else. But his colors told her the rest. The bruised purple deepening when he talked about the people he hadn't protected. The fault-line brightness flaring when he described the night itself. The particular grief of a man who had trusted and been wrong about it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The riders this morning," she said. "They'll come back." "Yes." "With more." "Yes." She looked at the valley in the late light. "My mother used to say the border territories remember what the capital forgets," she said. She meant the old pack bonds. The ones that predate the conclave, predate any throne. The ones that are just people who know each other, who owe each other, who show up when it matters. He was watching her. "I know people," she said. "Farmers, hunters, a blacksmith 2 valleys over who has kept her opinions about the Iron Conclave to herself for 7 months and is, I suspect, very tired of it." She paused. They're not soldiers. I'm not asking for soldiers, he said quietly. I know. She stood up. I'm asking if you want help. He looked up at her. The gold in his colors blazed. Why? He said. You don't know me. I know you, she said. I've been watching your colors. He stayed human for most of the next week. It was an adjustment, not because he was difficult, but because he was present in a different way than the wolf had been. The wolf had been a warm, uncomplicated weight in her evenings. The man had opinions and a voice and a particular way of going still when he was watching her that she was still learning to read. He helped with the farm work without being asked, doing everything with focused competence. The fence post he'd noticed leaning for 3 days, the shed roof she'd been meaning to patch since summer, the wood that needed splitting and got split, quietly, while she was in the field. On the 4th evening, she was mending harness leather at the table, and he was at the window, watching the valley road, and she became aware he'd been watching her instead for some time. What? She said, not looking up. Nothing. A pause. You move like every motion is already decided. I don't like wasted movement. I've spent 20 years in rooms where everything was performance, every gesture calculated for effect. He was quiet for a moment. You don't perform anything. She pulled the stitch through. I don't have an audience. You have me. You're not an audience, she said. You're someone sleeping in my spare room and eating my bread. She heard him exhale, not quite a laugh, but close. The wolf is simpler than you, she said, because she'd been thinking about it and she'd never been good at not saying things she was thinking. More direct. He knows what he wants and doesn't argue with himself about it. Callum was quiet for a moment. My father spent years teaching me to keep the wolf subordinate. He considered its instincts a liability. Your father sounds exhausting. A startled silence. He was. The wolf's judgment was correct, she said. He found this farm in the dark with silver in him and decided it was safe. He was right. She could feel him looking at her. He also stole my sweet potatoes, she added. That was a lapse in judgment, Callum said. And this time it was a real laugh, low and brief and genuine, and she felt it somewhere specific in her chest that she chose, deliberately, not to examine. The network came together faster than she'd expected. Petra, the blacksmith, arrived on the 2nd day with both her apprentices and the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this conversation for 7 months. She took one look at Callum and said, I knew it. The conclave's story had more holes than a beginner's first weld. Callum, to his credit, received this assessment with genuine gratitude, rather than the dignity of an offended king. Old Fenwick from the northern farms arrived next. Then the Aldrich sisters from the mill. Then a woman named Vesper, who had been a pack intelligence officer before the coup and had been living quietly in the valley ever since, waiting for something worth coming back for. They met in Rowan's barn, and Callum stood in the middle of them and was, for the first time since she had known him, entirely himself. She watched from the doorway. His colors were extraordinary. The bruised purple transformed now into something like old responsibility being lifted and carried properly, rather than dragged. The fault-line brightness steady and sure, and the gold everywhere, warm and overwhelming, filling the drafty barn like firelight. He was not performing. He was simply standing in her father's too-small shirt, talking to farmers and a blacksmith and a former intelligence officer. And the authority that came off him was not the kind that demanded acknowledgement. It was the kind that simply existed, like gravity, and you worked with it or you didn't. Petra caught Rowan's eye from across the barn and raised an eyebrow. Rowan looked away. The conclave soldiers came on a Monday. Not 4 this time. 15. With a commander in formal gray and the cold, flat colors of a man who had long since stopped questioning his orders. They came through the gate at mid-morning. Rowan was in the yard. She did not step back. We're looking for a fugitive, the commander said. Large man, dark hair. Goes by Callum. We have reliable intelligence placing him in this area. I live alone, Rowan said. We'll need to conduct a property search. You'll need jurisdiction for that, she said. This is Border Valley territory. The Iron Conclave's legal authority doesn't extend past the Ironmark River. The commander's jaw tightened. It does now. Show me the instrument. A pause. He hadn't expected that. The legal document extending Conclave jurisdiction to the border territories, she said. I'll wait. He didn't have it. She'd known he wouldn't. Fennick's youngest daughter worked in the Valley Land Registry and had spent 3 days going through every filed document. There was nothing. The commander's hand moved toward his sword. Callum walked out of the barn. He crossed the yard at a steady pace and stopped beside her, and she felt the weight of his presence, the particular gravity of him, which she'd gotten used to but which she suspected these soldiers had not. The commander went still. She's right about the jurisdiction, Callum said, his voice carrying across the yard with the ease of someone accustomed to being the last word in a room. But I'll save you the argument. Go back to whoever sent you. Tell them I'm here. Tell them I'm coming. You're under arrest, the commander said. His voice had lost its certainty. No, Callum said simply. I'm not. He shifted. Not the fractured, desperate shift of a wounded animal. He stepped aside for the wolf with complete deliberateness, the man choosing the wolf, fully, without conflict. One moment, he was standing beside her. The next, 800 pounds of silver-black wolf stood in the morning light, and the soldiers' horses screamed and tried to bolt, and several of the soldiers moved with them. Cinder sat down. He looked at the commander. He waited. The commander looked at the wolf, at Rowan, at the wolf again. She watched him calculate. She watched doubt enter his colors, thin but real. This isn't finished, the commander said. Come back with the paperwork, Rowan said. They left. Callum shifted back in the yard, standing in her father's clothes, and looked at her. That was. I know land law, she said. My mother taught me. I meant all of it. His voice was quiet. Standing there, not moving. She looked at him. The bruised purple was almost entirely gone from his colors now. The gold was steady and warm. I don't run, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. You don't. The reckoning came 12 days later. The Border Valley network had been busy. Word had moved through the farms and the mills and the hunting grounds and the forges the way word moved in places with long memories. Quietly, person to person. The old pack bonds her mother had told her about. They came from everywhere. And the Iron Conclave sent a real force this time. 30 soldiers, a general, and a conclave official in formal robes who had the cold, certain gray of someone who had convinced himself completely that what he was doing was righteous. They surrounded the farm at dawn. Rowan stood in the yard. Callum stood beside her. Behind them, in the barn and along the fence line and in the trees beyond the meadow, were the people of the border valleys, and they were very quiet, and the general's eyes kept moving to the tree line with an expression that suggested his numbers were coming out wrong. Surrender the fugitive, the general called out. No one has to get hurt. Rowan looked at Callum. He looked at her. Ready? She said. No, he said. Let's go anyway. He shifted, and from the tree line, the barn, the fence, a dozen other wolves shifted with him. Petra's apprentices, the Aldrich sisters, Vesper and her contacts, people who had been quietly waiting for a reason to stop being quiet. The general's horse shied badly. Callum walked forward through the soldiers who stepped aside for him the way water steps aside for stone, until he stood before the conclave official. And he sat, and he looked at the man. Rowan walked forward. The border territories have never recognized the Iron Conclave's authority, she said, her voice carrying in the morning quiet. You came here with soldiers and legal instruments that don't exist, and we let you come because we were waiting. Waiting for what? The official said, but his certainty was cracking. For him to be ready, she said, and for enough of us to be ready with him. And for you to come far enough from the capital that every person here could see, with their own eyes, exactly what you are. She looked at the soldiers. Not at the general, at the soldiers. Several of them had doubt in their colors. She'd been watching it build. "You're not traitors," she said. "You were told a story. You can choose a different one." Silence. A soldier in the third row lowered his weapon, then another. The general's jaw went rigid. He looked at Callum, at the assembled wolves, at the people along the fence line, and did the calculation, and came up short. "This isn't over," he said. "It is here," Rowan said. Callum shifted back in the middle of the yard, in her father's too small clothes, in the morning light, and he looked at the people who had come for him, the farmers, the blacksmith, the mill workers, the hunters, the former intelligence officer who had waited 7 months for this, and his colors were the most extraordinary thing she had ever seen. The bruised purple was gone. Entirely gone. He didn't make a speech. He looked at them and said thank you, and it was simple and direct, and it was the most king-like thing she'd ever heard, because it required nothing in return. Then he turned, crossed the yard, and went down on one knee in the mud in front of her. She stared at him. "What are you doing?" "Something I should be doing more gracefully," he said. "But I've been living in a barn and sleeping on a heart rug, and I seem to have lost my sense of ceremony." "Get up!" In a moment, he looked up at her. His eyes were amber in the morning light. The same amber as the wolf's. She didn't know how she'd taken so long to see it. "You took in a dying wolf, fed him and pulled silver out of him and gave him rules about which vegetables to steal. You saw his colors when he couldn't see them himself. You stood in this yard in front of soldiers and didn't move." He paused. "I have a throne to take back and a conclave to dismantle and roughly 20 years of political damage to repair. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be dangerous. It's probably going to involve a great deal of paperwork." "I know," she said. "I want you with me." She looked at him for a long moment. She was fairly certain she could hear Petra, behind her, physically restraining herself. "I'm a farmer," she said. "I know. I don't do courts. I don't perform. I don't manage rooms." "I know." His voice was very warm. "That's why it has to be you." She looked at his colors, the gold, the unnamed color, bright and uncontained, the color she'd finally understood in the rain, the color of someone who had found where they belonged and knew it. "Get up," she said. "You're kneeling in mud." He stood. She was still holding his hand. "The goats need someone to watch them," she said. "I'll watch the goats." "You'll be terrible at it." "Almost certainly. And you owe me a barn door." "I'll build you a better one." She looked at the valley in the morning light, at the people along the fence line who were very carefully looking elsewhere, at the meadow that had been her mother's and her grandmother's and would be hers for as long as she wanted it. "All right," she said. His hand tightened around hers. "All right," he said. That evening they sat on the porch steps and watched the stars come out over the valley, one by one. "I need to go to the capital," he said. "Soon. The conclave is weaker than they look. They always are, when the border territories stop cooperating." "I know. I meant what I said. In the yard. I know that too." He looked at her. "Are you afraid?" She thought about it the way she thought about everything, honestly, without rushing. "I've been afraid of small things my whole life," she said. "The town not liking me, being too strange, being alone." She paused. "This doesn't feel small." "It isn't," he said. "Then no, I'm not afraid." He shifted slightly and she felt his shoulder come against hers, warm and solid and entirely familiar in a way that had nothing to do with how long she'd known him. "The unnamed color," she said. The one I couldn't identify the first time you shifted in front of me." She looked at the stars. "I know what it is now." He was very still. "It's the color of someone who has found where they belong," she said, "and knows it, and is terrified of losing it." A long silence. "Yes," he said quietly. "That's exactly what it is." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. In the goat pasture, her old rooster, who had never once been troubled by 800 pounds of silver-black wolf sitting on the woodshed roof, made a contented sound and tucked his head under his wing. Something deep and warm and very quiet settled in her chest. "Here," it said. This is the thing. She already knew.